My grandfather is one of the toughest men I know. A decorated war hero, sharp as a blade even in his 70s, and the kind of man who built his life brick by brick with his own hands. He doesn't bow to anyone, and certainly not to an HOA. But that didn't stop Karen and her gang of wannabe enforcers from trying. Started small, harassing letters about his non-compliant fence, even though the property wasn't even part of their HOA. Then threats about dues he supposedly owed. He ignored them, calmly tossing each envelope into the wood stove. But Karen hated being ignored. One afternoon, when I was visiting him at the farmhouse, a group of men rolled up in black SUVs. They weren't real cops, but they sure tried to look the part. Cheap badges clipped to their belts, radios buzzing with static, and fake uniforms that looked like they'd been ordered from a Halloween catalog. The leader, a pudgy guy with mirrored sunglasses, barked, "Sir, we're with the HOA Enforcement Division. You're in violation of multiple codes. You'll need to come with us for questioning." My grandfather just raised an eyebrow. "Son, the only code that applies here is the U.S. Constitution, and you're about 3 steps away from trespassing." That should have ended it. But these clowns weren't leaving. One of them puffed his chest out and pulled what looked like a baton. Another grabbed for my grandfather's arm. And that was their mistake. In one swift motion, my grandfather sidestepped, twisted the man's wrist, and sent him sprawling in the dirt. The baton clattered harmlessly to the ground. The other officers froze, realizing they weren't dealing with some helpless old man. That's when Karen herself stormed out of one of the SUVs, screeching like a banshee. "You can't touch them. They're officers. You'll go to jail for this." Grandfather didn't even flinch. Officers of what? Certainly not the law. He pulled out his phone and called the sheriff's department directly. Within minutes, real deputies rolled up, sirens blaring, lights flashing. Karen immediately started playing the victim. "Sheriff, arrest this man. He assaulted my officers. He owes the HOA thousands." The sheriff, who happened to be one of my grandfather's old hunting buddies, calmly asked to see the officer's credentials. That's when the whole house of cards collapsed. The badges were cheap fakes. The radios weren't even turned on. And not one of them could produce a shred of legal authority. The sheriff's face darkened. "Impersonating law enforcement is a felony. You boys just bought yourselves a trip to county jail." As deputies cuffed the fake cops, Karen shrieked, clawing at the air. "No, this is a mistake. They work for me. I'm in charge here." The sheriff turned to her. "Ma'am, you're in charge of nothing. Step aside before we add obstruction to the charges." The HOA cronies were hauled off one by one, faces pale, their swagger gone. Karen stood trembling, realizing her little empire of intimidation had just been obliterated. Later that week, the news broke. Karen had been funding her HOA's security division by illegally collecting dues and funneling the money into her own accounts. With the fake cops now testifying against her, she was slapped with charges of fraud, extortion, and conspiracy. But the highlight? The local paper ran a photo of my grandfather standing tall on his porch, American flag waving behind him, the headline reading, "Decorated War Hero Defends Farm Against Fake HOA Police." Karen thought she could send imposters to bully a man who had faced real bullets, real battles, and real enemies. She thought intimidation would win where paperwork hadn't. But all she managed to do was remind everyone in town why my grandfather is a legend. The HOA fell apart. The fines and letters stopped. And Karen? She traded her fake enforcers for real prison guards. And every time I visit my grandfather now, he chuckles and says, "They sent boys in costumes to scare an old soldier. Wrong battlefield, wrong enemy."